11:30 a.m. at First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. That is about 30 miles southeast of San Antonio. The dead gunman has been identified as 26-year-old Devin Kelly, and his motive for this rampage is still unclear.
There's so many families who've lost family members, fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. The tragedy, of course, is worsened by the fact that it occurred in a church, a place of worship, where these people were innocently gunned down.
Adam Housley joins us live now from Sutherland Springs. Adam?
Yeah, John, in just a couple of minutes, we do expect the press conference to give us some more details. Roughly 23 hours since the shooting that took place here that killed 26 people and injured 20 others. I mean, take this into account, as one of the locals said, only a handful of people were not shot inside the church here behind me, a church that now has flags at half staff, one an American flag, one a Texas flag, and one a church flag, signifying the horror that took place here. We've been told by a number here that this church, very tight-knit, roughly 60 people were inside. They weekly stream their services. It was a popular church here in this very small community. Unfortunately, about 23 hours ago, a gunman walked in, dressed in tactical gear, walked to the front of the church, turned around, opened fire, spraying the church. At times, according to reports now, he walked up to some individuals as young as children and put a gun to their head to take their life. We do know that there were two heroes here. One opened fire, a neighbor. The other one jumped in with him, Johnny Langendorf. They chased this man down, and they caught him in a nearby county. And here's how they say it came to an end.
He hit the ditch. The gentleman that was with me got out, rested his rifle on my hood, and kept it aimed at him, telling him to get out, get out. There was no movement.
No movement, and now authorities say that the gunman took his own life. They also say those two men probably saved a lot of lives, that the gunman was prepared to take more. We do know the FBI is here on scene, as well as several other federal agencies working with the Texas Department of Public Safety, as well as Wilson County here. The FBI has been going door to door just in the last few minutes. We assume talking to witnesses or looking for witnesses, also looking for forensics. We do know that there's a gun battle away from the church, so there's a lot of crime scenes here to cover, John. In fact, several different locations, including the final spot where it ended, an intersection, and of course the horrific scene in the church behind me. We do expect more information, John, again, to come out here by my watch in about 12 minutes.
And Adam,
John, Melissa.
We're hearing now that Fox has confirmed that in fact he did die of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There had been some question about that, right?
Yeah, because we do believe he was shot, and in fact, if you talk to federal authorities, they'll tell you they believe he was shot by one of those heroes through his armor, and they don't know if that led to him taking his own life. You know, there's a lot of things here they just don't know. They might be able to figure that out depending on the autopsy. Was that bullet possibly taking his life, and the guy wanted to be able to do it himself? There's so many things here that still have to come out on this. You know, we may never know why, as we've covered these shootings before. But I got to tell you, Melissa, you know, I've been to Texas. I have relatives here, spent a lot of time in this state. This is a small postage stamp type community in the middle of the fields, in the middle of the pastures. You drive out here, there's morning fog through the oak trees. You know, this is a small little area with, you know, a couple of gas stations and a church. And that's where this horrific scene took place yesterday. People that come from the work and the work areas around here to come in for this little church in a little town in Texas that, you know, no one expects or wants to ever even think of something like this. I mean, you have grandchildren and grandparents that were killed inside that building.
All right, thank you so much for that. So tragic. President Trump reacting to the mass shooting while in Japan, saying that mental health was the issue here.
I think that mental health is your problem here. This was a very, based on preliminary reports, very deranged individual, a lot of problems over a long period of time. We have a lot of mental health problems in our country, as do other countries. But this isn't a guns situation. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little bit soon to go into it.
Bill McGurn is a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, the Main Street columnist for the Wall Street Journal, and a Fox News contributor. You know, when these situations happen and everybody sort of goes to their talking point corners, you know, this gun law would have prevented it. It wouldn't have prevented it. We need more guns. We need fewer guns. It seems like the American public tunes out to a certain extent because they've heard all that arguing before, and it doesn't seem to change anything. What's your take?
Yeah, I think this time it's been a little different because President Trump made some reference to God, and I think Paul Ryan said his thoughts and prayers with the people. It was amazing to me that many of the advocates of gun control denounce the idea of expressing your thoughts and prayers. You know, maybe it's the frustration that you mentioned. People are tired of seeing this happen, but there's been a really ugly kind of response in the aftermath of this.
Yeah. And what does that say? I mean, what does it tell you that we've seen sort of this ugly backlash, but it does seem like it's happening more frequently? I mean, it's sort of this frustration point that we're at in this country.
Yeah, look, people can kill, and they can kill with a lot of things. They can kill with empty kettles, as they did in Boston, or they can kill with a truck, as they did in New York. What if this guy couldn't get a gun and he waited with the truck to mow people down? You know, I think one of the things we have to come to grips with is that there is evil in the world, that it does take hold of some people's hearts, and that does result in very inhumane things being done to our fellow citizens.
Yeah, and you can see there on your screen for our audience that we are waiting for a press conference where we're going to get some more details on the investigation and what is going on in Texas after this horrific shooting. And as we wait for that, Bill, I want to turn your attention to the rest of the trip that the president is taking right now to Japan. The president sitting down with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and making some remarks about North Korea. Listen to this.
The regime continued development of its unlawful weapons programs, including its illegal nuclear tests and outrageous launches of ballistic missiles directly over Japanese territory, are a threat to the civilized world and international peace and stability. We will not stand for that. The era of strategic patience is over.
You know, they golfed together, they did a fist bump, he then talked very frankly about selling weapons to Japan so that they could better defend themselves. What comes of all that?
Yeah, well, the U.S.-Japanese alliance is the cornerstone of America's alliances in the region. It's very, very important. And the Japanese have good reason to fear what the North would do if free to attack them. Look, the two problems are Seoul, which is a civilian city that could be destroyed just by artillery. You don't need to have nukes to destroy Seoul. So the real dilemma is in dealing with the North. Can you deal with them in a way that does not make Seoul vulnerable? And the people in Seoul are very nervous, and the people in Japan are very nervous. And my belief is this is Donald Trump's red line, and he correctly drew it. We cannot allow them to reach the American mainland with their missiles. It'll be a different game. And the North Koreans have heard for 30 years all options are on the table, and they know all options weren't on the table.
Right.
So it's a very, very difficult thing, and I think the president has to resolve it.
Bill McGurn, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
John.
We are just a couple of minutes away now. We expect from that news conference, you can see they are gathering the reporters there in the middle of the street in front of the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. When that news conference begins, we will take you there live. In the meantime, we're joined by Sean Larkin, a Tulsa police officer and sergeant for the organized gang unit. Sean, everybody is saying, why? Why does a 26-year-old man walk into a church carrying a semi-automatic rifle and open fire? You have long police experience. What light can you shed on this?
You know, it's just like we've talked about in some of these other deals, like Las Vegas, you know, Columbine, Sandy Hook. Why are these individuals so angry, so distraught that they're wanting to take this out on these innocent victims? You know, they're finding these soft targets, and what we've seen in each one of these deals is these guys want to go in and do as much damage, but when they're confronted by somebody or law enforcement is moving in on them, they're taking their own lives. You know, these guys are cowards. And it's bringing so much pain to these small communities like we saw here in Texas. why is the question? It's just terrible.
Yeah, and you know, to flesh that out a little bit, you know, the heroes who confronted him as he was running out of the church, apparently he saw that they were armed, and at least the word that we've gotten, this could change because these early reports are sometimes not quite correct, but the early reporting was that he dropped his gun and then jumped in his car and drove off like he's scared. I mean, you're exactly right. He's a coward.
Exactly, and that's the term that describes the majority of these type of deals. They are cowards. You know, they arm themselves to go out and inflict this type of damage, and when they're confronted with someone who's willing to bring the fight to them, you know, law enforcement, you know, in this case, a citizen that did an amazing thing, and they do exactly that. They are straight cowards. They're not willing to battle out with somebody who's willing to meet them head to head on what they're trying to do.
The indications are that he had been busted while he was in the Air Force, even jailed for domestic abuse on not only his wife, but his child. What does that tell you about the mindset of this shooter?
You know, obviously he's got a violent individual. I've read some things this morning that's talked about even other girlfriends he's had, you know, since that incident that have said he has stalked them. You know, my question is I spoke with the local ATF head here in Tulsa and asked him about the, you know, ability to buy the firearms. It's a form called the 4473, and there's a series of questions on there that would prohibit somebody from getting a firearm. One of which, I believe it's 11G, that talks about having a dishonorable discharge. You know, from what I've read or we've heard, he was discharged for what's called a bad conduct. So that alone wouldn't prohibit him, but I believe it's 11I on the form. It talks about, have you been convicted for domestic violence in any court? And if in fact he was convicted for domestic violence, you know, there in the military, I understand he served a year for that sentence. I'm very curious, and you know, how was this missed when he went to purchase this firearm a year or so ago? Whether it was filled out, you know, differently on the military records from what we in law enforcement typically see. But if he in fact was convicted for domestic violence, he should not have been able to legally purchase that firearm.
Sergeant Sean Larkin from the Tulsa Police Department, thanks for your expertise as we continue to wait for that police update. Melissa?
That's right. You can see that on your screen there. We are awaiting an update from the police and the FBI this morning after the deadliest church shooting in U.S. history. We're going to bring it to you the second it starts and keep you updated on the latest information. We are awaiting a news conference right there by local authorities and the FBI. We're expecting them to come forward and answer some of the lingering questions now about this horrific mass shooting that we saw unfold yesterday in Texas. In the meantime, Adam Housley is our reporter who is live in Sutherland Springs, standing by right now. Adam, I mean, I guess the biggest question that's unresolved right now is we have no indication why, right?
Right. I mean, they're obviously going through everything online they can, interviewing family, interviewing friends. We do know that there's been some reports that he online talked a lot about atheism and even posting some shots of weapons. And obviously all that's being gone through right now. The FBI is part of this investigation as well. They have a fantastic team that goes into that type of thing. And as we await this press conference also, Melissa, we're also getting information now from the hospitals. University Hospital, which treated 9 patients from yesterday's shooting. They have just reported that 3 children and 2 adults remain there. Their conditions range from serious to critical. One pediatric patient died. We don't know if that's in addition to the 26 that have already been known or if that is part of the 26. A press conference obviously will clarify that. It's heartbreaking to think that a child was treated there, and those first responders at that level 1 trauma center, University Hospital, did everything they could to try to save that child's life. Unfortunately, as they report, their thoughts and prayers are with all the families involved here, including the child that has passed away. Again, that's from University Hospital. We're trying to get some clarification on that. And with this press conference, when it comes up here shortly, Melissa, we do know that they'll give us the updated numbers, at least in that respect. 20, last told, were injured. Only a handful, again, locals talk about this, only a handful of people in that church were not shot yesterday, nearly 24 hours ago, Melissa.
In the shooter's background, he was in the military, but he had been charged with domestic violence there?
Yes, and also some more background information we got too from our .com reporters who have been speaking with one of his close friends, talking about in high school he wasn't a loner in high school, New Braunfels. He had friends. He was well known. He wasn't super popular, but people knew who he was. So they're going through all this. They're going through his entire history. They're obviously looking at the military service, looking at the trouble he got in with the military, and also more recently, the purchase of the weapon or how he got the weapon, all those things come into play. How many weapons he had. Of course, we don't know exactly how he was armed. We have been told some of the things he had on him, including the armor. But all this stuff comes out as part of the investigation, Melissa. And the one thing they keep reminding us, too, if those two Good Samaritans, if those two heroes hadn't chased him down, one opening fire and hitting him, they say that the death toll here would have been higher. And just to think about that is again, this is the worst mass shooting in Texas history. And children, children were. I mean, that's what I'm reading this right now from University Hospital. I mean, imagine that. I can't. I got kids. You got kids. I can't imagine that. I don't know. I don't know how you deal with that.
It's devastating. Adam Housley, thank you.
Horrible.
Stand by for us here as we're waiting for this press conference, John.
So many media have assembled there that they toppled over the microphone stand with what looked to be a collection of maybe 30 microphones taped to it. They're trying to repair that. Still a couple of minutes away from the beginning of this news conference. We will be right back when that begins. Our Fox stations join us. This is Fox News coverage of the most tragic church shooting and mass shooting, actually, in Texas history. You're looking at the streets of Sutherland Springs, Texas, outside the First Baptist Church, where local authorities are about to tell us what they know regarding the shooting yesterday that left at least 25 parishioners dead. The gunman also died after a chase. We are about to hear what authorities know and perhaps something about motive. Let's listen in.
And I'm going to read something to start off this press briefing. Almost 24 hours ago, this community was struck by unthinkable tragedy. And first and foremost, we'd like to keep our thoughts and prayers with the families who have lost loved ones, the victims who were injured, and the entire community who's come together to support each other during this difficult time. Our investigators worked tirelessly around the clock since the shooting, and we will continue to do so to gather all the facts and evidence in this investigation. Here's what we confirm at this point. The deceased, there are 26 deceased, 23 in the church, 2 outside the church, and 1 at the hospital. The total wounded include, the total number is 20. There are 6 in stable condition or have been released. There are 4 in serious condition and 10 that remain in critical condition, so this number could rise. We ask that everyone keep them in your thoughts and prayers. The names of the victims will be released as soon as all of the next of kin have been notified. We appreciate everyone's understanding in the sensitive nature and process. The suspect we can confirm is Devin Patrick Kelly. He is 26-year-old white male. He was residing in New Braunfels, Texas. The cause and manner of the death with the shooter will be determined by a pathologist during the autopsy. However, investigators found evidence at the scene that indicates the subject may have died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We can tell you, as in with all active shooter situations, the number one goal of law enforcement is to neutralize the shooter. In this situation, we had 2 Good Samaritans that did that for law enforcement. This call went out as an active shooter call. Law enforcement was responding, but we know that a local resident that lives across the street from the church heard what was going on. He armed himself with an AR assault rifle and engaged the suspect. They engaged in gunfire here at the church. We know that the suspect was shot when he dropped his assault rifle, jumped in his Ford Expedition and fled the scene. This Good Samaritan, our Texas hero, flagged down another young man from Seguin, Texas, and jumped in his vehicle, and they pursued the suspect. We know during that pursuit, the suspect used his cell phone to notify his father that he had been shot and didn't think he was going to make it. Subsequently, he shot himself, and so as I said, the pathologist will determine the cause and manner of his death. We can confirm that the suspect did not have a license to carry. The suspect did have a non-commissioned, unarmed private security license similar to a security guard at a concert type situation. There were no disqualifiers entered into the National Crime Information Center database that would preclude him from receiving a private security license. Private security background checks, including fingerprints and criminal history checks with the Texas Crime Information Center and National Crime Information Center databases were checked, and he was cleared. I can tell you there is video recording from inside the church that has been secured, and we have viewed the video. The crime scene investigation will go on for days. All the bodies have been removed from the church. Our victims will be autopsied at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office. As I said, our suspect was autopsied this morning in Travis County, and that information will be forthcoming. We know you have a lot of questions. We'll answer what we can, but to start off with, I think we're going to go to the special agent in charge of ATF to answer questions that he can answer. His assistance to this investigation, the suspect.
ANOWSKI. I'm the special agent in charge of ATF's Houston Field Division. First and foremost, our hearts go out to the citizens of this community and the victims' families. I mean, it is obviously tragic for all of us. What I can confirm, there was 3 firearms that have been recovered. One was the Ruger 5.56 rifle that was recovered at the scene of the church. 2 additional handguns were recovered from the vehicle of the deceased suspect. One was a Glock 9mm, and one was a Ruger 22. I also can confirm that all 3 of these firearms were purchased by the deceased suspect. And there's been a lot of information in the media and question about the discharge of this individual from the military. What I will tell you right now is that in general, if an individual has a dishonorable discharge from the military, they would be prohibited from possessing or purchasing firearms. In this specific investigation, we are early in the investigation. We do not have all the documentation yet. So until we can get all the documentation to determine exactly what his discharge was, exactly what his conviction in the military, we will not have a determination on if this individual was prohibited from possessing or purchasing firearms. Thank you.
Next, we'll have the Wilson County Sheriff, Joe Tackett.
I think I spoke to most of you this morning. Some things have changed since early morning when I spoke to you, and we will be getting back with y'all later. And if you need, try to contact me. I think most of you did get my telephone number. Right now, our hearts are going out to all the family members that have lost family or have family in the hospital. Thank y'all.
Next, we'll have the FBI Special Agent in charge, Chris Combs.
Good morning, I'm Christopher Combs. I'm the FBI Special Agent in charge. First of all, our condolences to this community on this horrific act. We're here with our partners, the DPS and the Rangers, who we work with every day in support of them, assisting them in any way that we can. Right now, we're providing some of the evidence teams in support and also some technical support with phones, video that we talked about, going back to our lab at Quantico. So we are here in support of Texas DPS, and we will be here with them as long as they need. Thank you.
And one thing everybody wants to know is why did this happen? It's a senseless crime, but we can tell you that there was a domestic situation going on within this family. The suspect's mother-in-law attended this church. We know that he had made threatening texts from him, and we can't go into details about that domestic situation that is continuing to be vetted and thoroughly investigated. But we want to get that out there that this was not racially motivated. It wasn't over religious beliefs. There was a domestic situation going on within the family and the in-laws. And next, the Wilson County District Attorney, Aubrey Lewis.
Good morning. America truly is. We've had a tremendous outpouring across the country for people wanting to assist our families in need. And I want to make sure that everyone knows how they can help, because everyone can help. You can help by praying for these families and their loved ones, first and foremost, and everyone can do that. The other thing is you can help these families financially. And so we are working and in the process of setting up 2 bank accounts. The Sutherland Springs Community Association has a bank account through Commerce Bank in Stockdale that will be accepting monetary donations on behalf of the families. In addition to that, Wells Fargo will have an account as well set up for the victims of Sutherland Springs. And so that will be available for anyone to help. What we do not need at this point are canned goods and non-perishable items for the families. If you want a way to help, it's through prayer and it's through financial donations. And so we appreciate you guys sharing that information, and we are very grateful for this country and the just tremendous outpouring of support that these families are starting to receive. And we want to make sure that everybody knows how they can help. So thank y'all very much.
Also with us today, we have 2 Texas Ranger Majors, Corey Lane and Brian Brzezinski, who are the incident commanders for the investigation. So we will try to answer any of your questions you have at this time.
What did the video show, and will it assist in the investigation?
Of course, the video will assist in the investigation, and you know, it was a horrific event, and at this time we're not here to talk about the video.
Director Martin, could you explain what happened after the shooting happened? Could you back up a little bit and give us a description? There were reports that he was at the gas station, walked up right behind where you gentlemen are standing. Could you give us a little bit of that?
We know he was seen at the Bolero. He was obviously suspicious to others based on the way he was dressed in all black. At that time, I'm not sure if he had the mask on or not, but he was wearing a black mask that had a white skull face to it. Then he drove across to the church, and that's when he exited the vehicle and started shooting.
Was he wearing body armor?
He was wearing a ballistic vest with a plate on the front. There was no plate on the back, but he was wearing a ballistic vest.
The ongoing domestic situation that we're talking about obviously interests us a great deal. Can you tell us a little bit more on the text that were sent to you? It's possible
at this moment, we know that he expressed anger towards his mother-in-law who attends his church.
Do we know if she reported it to authorities before?
We don't.
Do we know if it had anything to do with his estranged wife? Was the anger towards her maybe breaking up the relationship?
We can't answer that.
One more question.
Is it your belief that the suspect would have continued to engage people inside the church and outside had it not been for the Good Samaritan who stepped in?
We can only speculate, but that would probably be better.
When did he buy the weapons? When did he purchase them?
These domestic terror.
No, at this time we do not have a terrorism investigation open. The Rangers are the lead. They have the investigation, and we're supporting them.
What's your name?
Chris Combs with FBI.
Where were the weapons bought? I understand the main weapons
So what we know is that he bought 4 weapons in total. 2 of them were bought in Colorado, 2 of them were bought here in Texas.
When were they purchased?
There was 1 purchase per year in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017.
When in 2017?
It's reported that he walked up the center aisle shooting and then walked right down the center aisle shooting. Would you just describe what actually happened there?
That's right.
The question is, could you describe what happened inside the church? There's a report he walked down the center aisle shooting and then walked back down and shooting. Is that correct?
Without getting into too much detail, the subject, there was some length of time that the subject spent inside that church in the shooting event. He moved around freely inside the church, but I'm not going to get into his exact dynamics within the church.
Has the pastor and his wife returned from the out-of-town trip yet? Has the pastor and his wife returned from the out-of-town trip? Were they on scene?
Yes, the pastor has returned.
Can you describe kind of what they're going through right now?
I can only imagine what he's going through.
How many of the victims were minors?
Children were inside the church.
We don't have all the information. There are several that obviously they're children, their exact ages. Yesterday, we released information that the ages ranged from 5 to 73. Those were the ones being treated at the hospital. Inside the church, the deceased actually ranged from 18 months to 77 years of age.
Real quick on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will tweet. Follow us on Twitter, please, and we will tweet something. As well, we plan on having a press briefing around 7 o'clock this afternoon.
A quick point of clarification. There's 3 Academy stores in San Antonio. Do you know which one the weapons were purchased at, just so we're correct on that?
We're not going to release that information.
What's your name?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all for coming again. We will brief y'all at 7 p.m.
My name's Freeman Martin, F-R-E-E-M-A-N, Martin, M-A-R-T-A-N. Hey, and with that, y'all, we would like to close in prayer.
What is your title?
How y'all doing? I'm Pastor Demas, and the church is grieving. The body of Christ across this world is grieving, but we're resilient, we're strong, and we're going to continue to worship God no matter what happens, no matter what attacks come. And that's a part of our faith. Our Savior Jesus died, and he died a brutal death. And this is what happens sometimes, but our faith is all those families are trusting in God. We want to pray for the pastor and the families briefly. Father God, we just give this to you, Jesus. We ask for your covering and your protection. We ask for your healing power, God. We ask for your strength. We ask for your help. You said weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So we pray this prayer over our pastors and our leaders across this nation and world. We are one church, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you all.
What's your church, Pastor?
What church are you with? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming again.
And so they end with a prayer. This news conference that gave us a little bit more information about what led a 26-year-old Air Force veteran named Devin Patrick Kelly to open fire inside that church building. We now learned that his mother-in-law, or perhaps former mother-in-law, was a member of that congregation. 26 people from that church are dead now. And we learned a little bit more about the heroes who pursued and confronted him. A local man took out a semi-automatic rifle similar to the kind that Kelly was using inside that church, opened fire on Kelly, then jumped into the truck of another man named Johnny Langendorf. They pursued Kelly. During that pursuit, which went into another county, Kelly called his own father on a cell phone and said, "I've been shot and I may not make it." Authorities believe he then took one of his handguns, turned that gun on himself, and died there. Please stay tuned to Fox News Channel and this Fox station for continuing coverage of this story. I'm John Scott in New York. And our coverage continues now with Adam Housley, who is live in Sutherland Springs. Everyone's been asking Adam about motive, and it appears that bad blood within his family or his former family, his former in-laws, may have been at the root of this attack.
Yeah, John, a number of headlines from that press conference. First of all, there had been, of course, domestic problems in his history. Clearly, that had been found out very early on in this investigation. And there had been some talk this morning here locally that there was a family connection to this church. Now we know that the mother-in-law, or former mother-in-law, was part of this congregation, and he had sent her threatening texts, according to that press conference. Also, some other headlines come out of that just beyond me. In fact, John, it's kind of hard to show, but behind me right now is the church, obviously, with the command center in front of it. Just beyond that church, a stone's throw away, if you will, is a gas station. There are only 2 of them in this little town. And it's at that gas station where the erratic behavior was first noticed. He was dressed in that tactical gear. And at some point after he left the gas station and drove a very short distance to the church here, he put on a mask with a skull, a white skull on the front of it. And that's what he was wearing inside that church. They said he spent some time in there, which goes along with what we've been told, which is he walked around spraying the church, shooting people at point blank range. The youngest victim inside, another headline, John, the youngest victim, 18 months, the oldest, 77 years. We do know that the only victim that died at a hospital was a child, and that there are still 3 children at University Hospital and 2 adults in either serious or critical condition. Obviously, prayers go out and thoughts go out to the families there as the medical staff works to try and save their lives. But John, a number of headlines came out of that press conference. You can tell where this investigation seems to be going. He also bought 4 weapons, the 4 weapons used over the last 4 years. He bought 1 a year, 2 in Texas and 2 in Colorado, buying 1 of those each year. John, as you can see, this seems to have a domestic connection with the mother-in-law. That was a bit of a headline that came out of there. In fact, it is the headline, I would say, from that press conference. And as you can tell, a lot of healing needing to be done here with ending the press conference with a prayer, John.
And I believe he got out of the Air Force in 2014, meaning he would have purchased each of those weapons after he was dishonorably discharged. The investigators say they're still looking into it. They think he should not have been able to legally purchase those weapons as a result of his dishonorable discharge, but it is still something they are looking into. Adam Housley there in Texas. Adam, thank you.
All right.
So we will continue to cover this, the story of the morning. 26 people dead after this horrific shooting in Texas, including the daughter of the pastor of that church, Annabelle Pomeroy, just 14 years old. More in just a moment.
All right, so we are bringing you the latest on this deadly shooting that took place in Texas a short time ago. We learned some of the motive, possible motive for the shooting, as well as some more information on how he obtained those guns and whether or not it was legal. Joe Concha is a media reporter for The Hill, and Judith Miller is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist and a Fox News contributor. Joe, let me ask you a little bit about the dialogue that has been going on around this. I mean, as usual, the debate just immediately begun about guns, and we sort of heard a lot of the same talking points we've heard before. I wonder if the American public is tired of that.
Oh, I'd say they're definitely numb, Melissa. This is the 377th mass shooting this year. We're at the point now where we're actually ranking mass shootings in churches. It's not even like, hey, this is the biggest mass shooting in Texas. Now we actually have rankings for churches. It's just so sickening. I have a 4- and a 2-year-old at home, and I hear that an 18-month-old died here. Grandparents and grown children. It's horrible. But you're right. The script is always the same. We saw last week in that horrific attack in downtown Manhattan, just 20 blocks from here, and then we see at night, primarily in cable news, primarily on social media, that the debate will become about immigration because it was a Muslim that rented a truck in Jersey that plowed down those poor people in that bike path. And now in this particular instance, we're already seeing, for instance, from the New York Times, they have a ticker that's up right now that has hours, minutes, and seconds, and they ask the question, how long before it's too soon to debate gun control? So, yeah, I mean, with 377 shootings, that's obviously more than one a day. It's become formulaic at this point in terms of what happens next after the initial reporting, like we just saw, is done.
But, you know, Judy, the indications are that this is a guy who should not have been able to buy weapons. He had been dishonorably discharged from the Air Force for violently assaulting his wife and his child, and then either lied about it on the applications or somehow was able to get his hands on weaponry. If somebody is intent on doing evil, they're going to do it, aren't they?
They are, but it's a lot easier to do evil with an automatic or semi-automatic weapon, and I will never understand why, even if you're a hunter, you need an Uzi to hunt for your lunch. I mean, at some point, we've come from Sandy Hook and the slaughter of the children in that school to this little postage stamp town, Sutherland Springs. In Texas, it is just heartbreaking, but at what point are Americans going to say, enough of this, enough slaughter, enough useless death, when we can just start by denying people like this demented animal the right to buy a weapon. We can start by enforcing the gun laws we have on the books and denying people weapons who shouldn't have them, and then talk about things, not talk about what the Congress is talking about, like whether or not we ought to have have silencers on weapons, but getting rid of bump stocks that will boost up a semi-automatic into an automatic. At some point, the American people are going to rise up and say, we've got to get serious about this. We've got to stop it. And until that happens, we're just going to go on having these horrific scenes.
Judy, I don't know if that, and John, I'm sorry to jump in, and I agree with you on everything that you said. But after Sandy Hook, when 24 children are mowed down in an elementary school, after Las Vegas, where 58 people are killed from a maniac that has a gun from a hotel room on a 32nd floor, after those shootings, nothing ever happens here. We have two sides that are so entrenched in their particular belief on this that I don't see after those shootings how this would change anything either. It's the same script over and over again, John.
But again, you do have, a couple of heroes who had access to guns or a gun, who helped make this thing from being worse than it actually might have been otherwise by taking on the shooter with a semi-automatic weapon. I mean, as the one of the police investigators we were talking to earlier said, these guys are cowards.
So the way the debate will carry out tonight in a lot of the opinion shows will be that exact argument that a guy with a gun stopped another guy with a gun, and that's why we can't regulate these sort of things, while the other side would say, well, neither probably should have had those weapons in the first place. Again, rinse, repeat, and recycle.
And that's only in this instance. What about all the instances in which there's no one there to fight back?
Right.
Again, we're just learning more about the motivations of this suspect. It appears he had problems, had been making threats to his mother-in-law or ex-mother-in-law, who was a member of that church. But the investigation goes on. Judy Miller, Joe Concha, thank you both.
Thank you, John.
Our coverage continues on Happening Now in just a moment.